So hello everyone and welcome to today's webinar entitled the Nakisa Hanelly Organizational Design. My name is Sharif Luca and I'm a Senior Solution Engineer based out of Germany, and I will be your presenter today for this session. Really excited to be hosting this session and showing the organizational design solution Hanelly. So during today's presentation, I will be covering four main topics. First, I'm going to be talking a little bit about Nakisa as a company. Then I will be walking you through the organizational design solution called Hanelly. And hopefully this will be enough to set the stage before I jump into the solution demonstration. And of course, following that, we plan a 10-minute Q&A session. So please feel free to send your questions to me through the chat or the questions section of this GoToWebinar, and I will be answering your questions at the end of the session. And of course, don't worry if I do not get a chance to answer all your questions during today's webinar. We will be following up afterwards, including sending you a copy of this presentation. So Nakisa, at a glance, we are a company which is headquartered in Montreal, Quebec. We do have offices, of course, globally. Myself, I'm connecting from the German office here in Waldorf. We do have as well offices in Frankfurt in Germany. We serve over 4 million users and over 800 enterprises worldwide. We have over 20 years of experience in the areas of HCM and finance. So on the finance side, which will not be the topic of today's presentation, but just to let you know, we offer lease administration solutions for companies to comply with the FIRS 16 and ASC 842 standards. We're also proud to work with some of the world's largest organizations, as you can see with the company logos shown on that slide, that are operating in multiple different countries, working in different languages, and we are industry agnostic. So we have multiple different customers in multiple different industries, like oil and gas, public sector, pharmaceuticals, banking, etc. Let's have a quick look on the Nakisa Milestone. So we actually started as a consulting firm back in the 1990s, and we built our first organizational solution in 2001. And it was becoming quite evident in doing so that our partners and customers did require a lot more than just visualization. So there was a need for design and modeling. And it was, if not more important than just visualization, it was quite key for them. So we built our first modeling solution in 2003. And in 2007, there was also another milestone for Nakisa, where we became a Tier 1 or solution extension partner of SAP. What that means is that we were on the SAP price list. The solutions were sold and supported globally by SAP, and we had to go through a very stringent process called the premium qualification process that we had to go through. In 2015, we released our organizational design solution Hanelly, which is the focus on today's webinar. And we transitioned to the cloud with that solution. 2017, we had another milestone on the finance line of business, where we also became a Tier 1 partner of SAP, and we released the lease administration by Nakisa solution to the market. One of the things I wanted to mention as well is that in 2018, SAP has chosen to use the Nakisa Hanelly solution globally to support their organizational design needs, and this is for really over 85,000 plus employees. Okay. Now let's have a look on Hanelly itself as a solution. And just before I talk about Hanelly, let's define what we mean by organizational design. So from the perspective of Hanelly or Nakisa in general, every organization, regardless of its size, it could be a small or medium or large business, but you do have three main components that you work with. You have your talent or the people, you have your processes, and you have your culture. And you need to align all that with your business objectives and corporate strategies. For us, this is exactly what we define as organizational design. So the Hanelly solution is a solution that is that offers powerful, intuitive support for organizations when it comes to visualization, but also creating organizational designs to allow them to really align the strategies and streamline the processes in order to accelerate business growth. And you will see that more and more when I jump into the demo and give you some examples of what we mean by accelerate business growth and what we mean in general when we talk about organizational design. If you look at the HCM Life Cycle, there are different processes, whether they are HR related or talent related. Where we focus on is the area of organizational transformation. And the Hanelly solution is designed to be an ERP agnostic solution. So based on the history with SAP, we do offer native integration, of course, with SAP ECC or SAP SuccessFactors Employee Central, but we also integrate with other major ERPs that are out there in the market. So the likes of Workday, Oracle, PeopleSoft, or Fusion. And in some cases, we also offer, if that's needed, integration through Excel. And this is really the model that our business process consulting partners are using to upload data into the Hanelly solution to help analyze and turn all that data that they have into information and into insight and into action. In essence, what we do is really, with that integration, we allow you to use your HCM solution data to perform the organizational design tasks within Hanelly, which is something you cannot do on using your HCM solution alone. So most of the organizations we work with or we talk to prior to implementation of Hanelly, they are heavily reliant on some redundant and inefficient processes, things like Excel or PowerPoint or Visio, which are, of course, quite costly and can hinder your ability to really effectively and efficiently simulate and plan these organizational transformation activities. So with Hanelly, of course, we try to address this. Let's have a quick look on some of the business challenges that some of our or most organizations face today. And if you look at what organization management experts have identified or noticed, that there are some few challenges or trends that weren't really on the radar a few years ago. And to name some of these challenges, number one is the globalization of workforce. So you have employees that are working in different regions, in different time zones, which could lead to complex reporting structures. In my case, for example, I'm based out of Germany. My manager is based in the headquarters in Montreal, but I do have functional reporting lines into the German entity here as I'm based in Germany. So these complex reporting structures become very difficult to visualize as well as to model when you are looking into building a future organizational structure. In addition to that, in order for you to do organizational transformation, you cannot only rely on HCM data. You need to rely on other information, things like talent-related information, things like financial-related information, and you need to bring all that together into the application to be able to to have enough information to make the right decision based on this data that you have and turn it into information and into actionable insights. Maybe just talk a little bit about another challenge, which is diversity and inclusion. We've all seen how much money companies spend for the diversity and inclusion programs that they run. From a Hanelly perspective, diversity can mean different things. It can, mean differences in age, gender, disability, nationality, or ethnicity for your employees, and gender as well. And inclusion is to be able to create a working culture where these differences are in fact valued. And this is something very important because it leads to a productive and more successful and more efficient workforce. So it's becoming not just an HR trend or a compliance, but it also speaks to the creativity, the forward thinking, and the innovation that organizations have. So again, it's one of the topics that I will try to touch base on briefly today during the demonstration and talk a little bit about it. The last three main components here. You talk about, running, restructuring, organization transformation to support things like mergers and acquisitions and divestitures, reduction in force, or even any kind of structural change, whether you want to centralize certain functions, decentralize, or going through a large scale restructuring within an organization. These are all challenges, and having the right solution to support and to accelerate these processes become key. One last slide before I talk a little bit about the demo and jump into the demo. This is what Hanelly is made of. So Hanelly is a solution which is offering different functionalities to support the different needs of our customers and partners, and it's really been built based on customers' feedback and constant market research and years of professional experience. So when we look at org chart, this is really the keystone or the platform of Hanelly, and it provides you with a global view of the organizations to facilitate this communication and foster collaboration between your employees. The org design, as I mentioned, it's really meant for HR professionals, for executives, for line of business managers to effectively manage the workforce. And again, you can use it to build and evaluate models to prepare for anything planned or unplanned change within your organization, whether it's related to merger and acquisition activity, reduction in force, or a reorg in general. The last part is the HR analytics, and what we've done here is we divided that into three main components. You look at the descriptive analytics, which gives you an indication of what your baseline is. What is the span of control? What is the head count? What is the total cost of your current organizational structure? And then we also looked at prescriptive analytics, or what we call impact analysis. So when you're doing a model or running a scenario and you start changing things, what is the impact that has on various KPIs within the organization? And last but not least, we look into predictive analytics as well, where we look at your turnover analysis, whether it's related to departures, retirements, or terminations of employees, looking at various trends in the data, and analyzing this past information in a way to predict what the future structure may look like. Okay. So now I'm going to jump into the demo, and I will follow the same sort of process I described before, or functionality I described before. I'm going to start with the baseline, which is simply the organizational structure, and then from there I will move into an example of an org design, and from there I will also talk a little bit about the analytics. So let's start with the baseline here. I will start with what we call the manager perspective, which in this example just provides you with the full picture of the organizational structure, including your matrix structures, whether if you have functional and legal reporting lines, they will all be part of this manager perspective here. So this is a position-to-position structure that is shown on the screen. So you can see here Mark Johnson, he's the CEO located in Chicago. I can see all the different direct reports below Mark Johnson. At any point in time, I can drill down to any of the organizations. So let's say if I want to expand the Senior VP of R&D, which is head by Sarah Lambretta, I can simply do that by expanding her structure below. One thing you will note in this specific perspective is that you'll be able to see dotted and solid lines at the same time. So here in this example, Saskia Lins, she has a solid reporting line into Sarah Lambretta. This indicates a legal reporting line into Sarah, but she also appears again in the structure with a dotted line into Mark Johnson, indicating that she has a functional reporting line into Mark Johnson. In Hanelly, this is supported from a visualization, but also from a modeling perspective. And you can always toggle back and forth between the different perspectives. If you want to display both in the same structure, you would go with the manager. If you want to only focus on the legal perspective, or if you don't maintain these functional reporting lines, then you would only have the legal perspective to show. In this example, I will work with both to show you how we can work as well with matrix structures. Okay, so one thing as well to note in here is that at any point in time, if you want to get more information about a specific position, you can simply switch to two-panel mode and simply go to the position profile by clicking in the position box itself. This will take you to the position information displayed on the right-hand side. This information will be coming directly from your ERP, whether it's SAP, SuccessFactors, Workday, or even information that you pass to Hanelly using an Excel file. Everything I'm showing you here today in today's session is what's included in the standard configuration of Hanelly. So you will see different types of information, HR related, personal administration related, organizational management related, as well as talent related information, and as well information coming from the payroll system like salaries and salary scales for this organization here. Okay, so now as we talked about the structure that you're seeing here, what we also included in Hanelly is the ability to support different types of information to support different processes. And what I mean by that is we've included the views, and here you have different types of views. If you are, let's say, looking at your talent management process and you want to track talent-related information, you would select the talent view, and in this example, you will see things like key positions, performance rating, talent assessment rating, or potential rating, and risk of loss information for your employees. These are very key information when you're going through a restructuring, especially if you want to ensure that during a restructuring process, you retain your talent and not lose sight of them. This becomes important to track this information here. But as we are focusing more and more on the organizational design topic, I will switch from these standard views here, and I will go into the analytics for employee view as well. You can see here at the bottom, there is a succession view, so you can track succession related information, and you can also do succession modeling. So I can say I can promote a successor to become the incumbent of a position, and I can do succession modeling in Hanelly. For the purpose of today's session, what I will do is I will focus on the analytics view, because this offers a lot of information which is quite relevant and often used in an organizational design scenario or a process. So for example, here you are looking at 3 KPIs, and as a user you can define what KPIs you want to focus on. We have a number of KPIs that are available in the standard. In this example, we're looking at the span of control. So in this example here, the CEO, Mark Johnson, has a span of control of 9. An organization like the public relations senior manager here by Marga, she has a span of control of 17. And the VP of finance as well, Mary Jonathan, she has a span of control of 19. If you zoom in, you'll be able to see clearly that if you are beyond if you are above certain best practices, you can define this using these thresholds. So in this example, 19 is quite high. The expected value was to be between 4 and 15, and that's why this is indicated by an arrow pointing upwards in blue. These thresholds, which is based on your best practices, can be defined by the user directly in the Nakisa application or in the Hanelly solution. And this is quite good because it offers you a visual whenever there's any data anomalies that you have, and then you can use org design later on to correct these data anomalies, or these to audit your data and correct it. Okay, so if you look again at some of the analytics that we show here as well, I'm showing headcount as the second KPI, and I'm showing the total cost or the total salary of my employees as the third KPI. We've included a number of standard analytics, as you can see here in this drop-down menu, things like the depth of the organization, and you can argue why are these KPIs important. As an example, the depth of an organization is very important because when some of our customers implement Hanelly and they look at the depth, they see things like 20 or even more than 20. So this means that they have organizations with 20 different layers below, and that can have an impact on your operations, on the time to decision, because you have to go through a complex workflow process and approval to get things approved within the organization. So we track that not only from a baseline, looking at your baseline, but also from a modeling perspective. The same analytics that you see here are available as well when you're doing restructuring, to be able to track inefficiencies in the data and correct it directly in Hanelly. Layer is another very important KPI. You can see for every position which layer these positions are in. Okay, so let me go back to span of control and headcount and total salary. These are the three KPIs I want to focus on. And the advantage, what this view offers you as well, is the ability to filter and to drill down on various information. So let's say you are an HR manager or an HR business partner, and you've been asked to look at your expected retirees within the organization due to age. So you can very easily filter on the data, and you notice what happened. The headcount immediately went down. Let me just do this one more time. The headcount was 1,546. That's the total number of employees that are directly and indirectly below Mark Johnson. When I select 60 to 69, right away I can see that this number went to 259. And I can see that most of them are actually located in the manufacturing organization here, which is managed by Heli Carlson. So if I want, I can root at Carlson's organization. And again, I can see how these numbers are being calculated. Most of them, 56 employees that are between 60 and 69, are belonging to the Regional Manager Production Organization, which is headed by Curtis Quimby. Probably one question you have is, perfect, what can I do with this information? Can I share it? Can I disseminate it to other users within the organization to be able to take action on it? Yes, you can. So you have different options here. You can add this report as one of your favorite reports. So I can say this is the manufacturing retirees as an example. And by doing so, I now have this view maintained as one of my favorites. Or if I want to drill down to exactly know who these 63 employees are, I can simply click on that internal search, which is a structure-based search that takes into account my filter criteria that I've selected here. So I will go ahead and perform the search. Like the concept of the org chart views, you also have different views on the right-hand side here. I can switch to a table view, which is, again, probably more familiar with HR managers. They prefer to work with Excel. So this allows me to define things like what are the different columns or fields that I'm displaying and the order of these fields. And of course, I can add this as well to my favorites. So this becomes a report. Or if I want, I can share this dynamically with other users. Now, the advantages of the sharing using the permanent link is twofold. Number one, you have access to real-time information. So if someone leaves the organization tomorrow and I access this report, I will get 62 records instead of 63. And the second thing is it takes into account the security of the users. So if I, by mistake, send that link to Mark Smith, but Mark Smith is an employee as well as an HR person, but I send it to the wrong Mark Smith, then Mark will get access denied when he tries to access this report, because it doesn't have the correct roles and authorization to provide him access to this report here. Of course, if you want to export this to Excel, you can go ahead and do that as well. Something, again, you can do relatively easy in Hanelly. And the way this works is once the Excel is ready, you will get notification from the notification center here, allowing you to download this Excel report with the 63 employees that are part of this report here. Okay. So here it tells you when was this report generated, who generated that report, and the exact time this report was generated. And of course, all the fields that you selected to become part of this report will be available here, like employee ID, first name, last name, all the way to the talent-related information, including risk of loss at the very end here. Okay. Of course, at any point in time, you can select an employee, let's say Weston Misty, and when I select that employee, it takes me to the profile page of that employee, and then from the profile page, I can simply go back and look where this employee is sitting in the organizational structure. Okay, so this is just a very quick overview of how you could use, how you can understand the baseline and having these very powerful in-chart analytics that give you a lot of insight on your data. Now, let's say that you want to address one of the issues that you have with the VP of Finance organization here, which is the high span of control, and you want to do an organizational design scenario to address this. This becomes very easy. You can just simply click within the box itself, and then you can say, I'd like to create a new scenario. By doing so, you can define the name of that scenario. So maybe I'll just call it VP of Finance Restructuring. I can define the type of scenario that I'm trying to create. If it's a mergers and acquisitions or an integration scenario for a company that you've acquired, I would choose a merger scenario. And then this will allow me to import data of the acquired company, normalize it with my current organizational data, and then go through a workflow process and approval process after that integration, go through a validation of the new structure once I've been doing this integration, and also allowing me to write it back once it's been approved. So this is one of the key differentiators of Hanelly. It's the ability to not only do what-if scenarios and do modeling, but also to write back the changes back into your ERP following a full vetting and an approval process, which I will talk about right now when I give you an example of an organizational design. So for the interest of time, what I've done is I went ahead and I've created a scenario. I called it Org Design 2019 webinar. And what I will do, I will just open that scenario. And you'll notice I haven't done any changes to it yet. But what I've done is I've created two things. Number one, I defined an objective or a target for my scenario. And these objectives or targets, you can define very easily here. So you can say that I'm creating this organizational design in order to address an increase in headcount by a specific percentage scenario, or because I want, in this example, to align the span of control to be between a specific value, let's say 5 or between 4 and 15, like I did in this example. So you can go ahead and create these targets. And then once you have these targets, they get cascaded downwards to every work area that you define. So in order to make this clearer for you, when you are working on an org design, a large-scale restructuring project, typically it involves multiple stakeholders that are collaborating together, they are working together, and you can assign different work areas to different HR business partners or HR managers based on their area of responsibility. And when you do that, in this example here, I have two work areas created. One is the org design scenario itself, which was created by myself, Mark Smith, which is the person I'm logging in as an HR specialist. And I created another work area, which is the VP of Finance, and this is now assigned to Elizabeth Templeton. And notice when I create these work areas, they inherit these targets that I've defined. So the targets are cascaded downwards to all the work areas so that everyone is working towards the same target, towards the same objective that has been assigned by the leadership team. So let's go back to the scenario and load it. And in this example here, we have an identical copy of your baseline, of your current organizational structure. The only difference is that I'm allowed to modify that structure to meet these objectives and these targets that have been assigned to me. So in this example, I want to reduce the span of control of the VP of Finance organization to be more in line with the best practices of the organization, which means a span of control needs to be below 14 or below 15. So I can go ahead and root at Mary Johnson to look at her structure here, and you can see that she indeed has a large span of control. What you will notice as well is these different color codes. You can very easily identify certain positions or certain employees. Maybe your top talent, you want to color code these individuals, let's say green, so that during a restructuring project, you don't want to lose sight of them, and you want to make sure that you retain them within the model that you're working on. Yellow could mean that you want to maybe transfer these positions. Red, maybe you want to delimit or terminate some of these positions within the organization if you want to do, let's say, a reduction in force exercise. But for the purpose of this example, what I will do is I will create a layer below the VP of Finance, and I will move these billing specialists under that layer, and I will call that position that I'm creating the billing manager position. So now we've created a new position. When you create it, of course, there's no incumbent yet because we have not assigned any manager, any billing manager yet, or any employer to that position. But you can very easily dynamically drag and drop the Wayne Rose, for example, who's a billing specialist under the billing manager. Notice that before the change, the span of control was 19, and you will notice again that the span of control will immediately change to reflect the change that I've worked on. And that's what I meant when I said prescriptive analytics, being able to have an impact analysis directly and get that feedback of the changes that you're doing directly in the system. So let's say in this example, I also moved Lionel. So now we've moved 3 different positions. Every change that you do is tracked in the system. It tells you who tracked the change, when it was done, what type of change it was, and you can get to the audit log directly by, if you want to get, for example, if I click on the billing specialist position here, I'm able to see the audit log for that position. So it tells me that this was a move operation that was done on exactly that date. So this is the 19th of March, 2019, exactly at that time. It was done by Mark Smith, and the original value was VP of Finance, and I moved it to the billing manager. So every change that you do is tracked in the system, and you can take that log report and export it to Excel if you want to get a detailed report of all the changes that were part of your scenario. Of course, in a typical large structuring exercise, you will not be doing things manually one by one like that. You may need to do mass changes. And to give you a quick example of a mass change, maybe I want to move all these appraisal positions under the billing manager, so I can go ahead and run a search. And in this example, I will search for positions. I will type the word appraiser to get my appraiser positions. I will select all of them at once, and then I will go to the mass actions, and here's where I can edit them or move them or compare them side by side if this is what I want to do. So let's take an example of a move operation. And in this case, I will move them to the newly created billing manager position, which I should be able to see here in this list. And I will just do submit. So now we've moved 4 appraisal positions as well from the VP of Finance under the billing manager. So going back to the structure here, you can wait a few seconds to see the changes reflecting, or if you want, you can just simply expand and just collapse the VP of Finance organization so that you refresh the screen, and right away you will see that the span of control went down to 12 from 19. That's where we started. You can see it here. The headcount is still the same, and the total salary is still the same. And if you go to the scenario management page where we define these work areas, you will notice, let me just quickly load it again. You will notice that everything is now turning into green because you've achieved your targets or objectives for all these work areas that you've been working on. Okay. So maybe just one more change. Let's say I would like to promote someone to this billing manager position. I can go ahead at the top level of the organization and maybe look for someone that is possible to take over that newly created position. We have 1,538 employees, so I will, of course, not navigate the structure to find a suitable candidate. I will go ahead and run a search. And then from the search, I will basically start using the filter panel, which contains a lot of information, mostly divided into different focus areas or different profiles, things like diversity and inclusion, things like talent, compensation. These are all different filter profiles that I can work on. But just to give you an example, I can, let's say, look for someone who has at least 4 to 6 years of experience. Right away, when I do that, the result set will change. I can look for someone that has a high risk of loss because maybe I want to promote that person before they leave the organization. Someone that has a high potential, as an example. And then I can add to these filters until I narrow down my result set. So being able to dynamically filter on the data and drill down to exactly what you want becomes very key. And imagine if you were to do this in Excel. First of all, you need to get all the information from different systems, your HR, your payroll, and maybe even your talent management system. You need to consolidate it in an Excel report, which can take maybe even a few days. And then you can, by the time you make a decision, maybe the data becomes obsolete. So this dynamic way of working makes it so easy for you to find information. So I have here 6 candidates or so. I can select all of them. I can compare them side by side very quickly to try and find maybe the best candidate for my billing manager position and then promote that person. In this example, this could be a subjective view or an objective view following my filtering and following my search that I've done. But in this example, let's say Tia is my perfect candidate for the position. From the same screen that you're in, I can drag Tia across the panel to make her the billing manager. And to do that, we can very easily switch to 2-panel modes. And I will just show it to you directly here. So I will go ahead, I will take the search on the right-hand side, and I will leave that structure here on the left-hand side, and I will take Tia's record and I will add her to become the billing manager. Okay. Now, when I did that change, first of all, notice that Tia's name shows in the structure, the span of control is updated, the head count is updated, and the total salary is also updated. And the same thing for the VP of Finance. All these changes are propagated upwards under the VP of Finance organization here. Often, when you're doing restructuring, you want to compare the new organizational structure with the previous or with the old picture, or maybe you want to even compare different models together side by side. A typical use case would be that you're running different scenarios in parallel, and only one that gets approved at the end following these comparisons that you're doing. So in this case, I'm going to root at the VP of Finance organization here. And what I will do is I will take it basically to the right-hand side of the screen so that I'm able to compare it with the current organizational structure that we have. And in order to compare them, I will also root at the VP of Finance organization so I can compare them side by side. And right away, if I fit this to the screen, you can see that the right-hand side has a much leaner, is a much leaner structure. And I can see that everything is shown as green because I am meeting my objective and target for the span of control. And you can see right away the impact the changes that you've done has on these KPIs. So the span of control went from 19 to 13. The headcount went up by 1, and that's because I hired Tia Abraham, or I moved Tia Abraham to become the billing manager. And then finally, the total budget or total cost went up from 18.83 million to 18.87 million, which indicates, of course, the salary that I have for Tia. So this is, again, a very powerful way for me to analyze the impact. What I want to show you next is something very, very key. The in-chart analytics are very good when you're looking at structural data, but sometimes you want to analyze data in a non-structured way or more in a dashboard way. In order to do that, you can just load the dashboard in Hanelly, and this is really a very powerful analytics module, which allows you to analyze the data. And you will notice that the filter panel is also available across the application. So you're able to drill down based on various different criteria. There are different graphs which we enabled as part of the out-of-the-box configuration, and they are really designed to support your different HR focus areas. So for example, if I look at diversity and inclusion, I'm able to look at things like age distribution. So I can see that I have between 60 and 69 a headcount of 31. and so on. So I'm able to look at this data. Now, in order to load the dashboard for the entire company, you need to change the scope. So instead of focusing on the VP of Finance, I will go up one level to the CEO, and then I will reload the dashboard so that you can see that this is always contextual based. This will then open the dashboard for the entire organization. So you can see here the total headcount that I have based on the age distribution, based on my gender distribution, nationality, and so on. In the example I gave before, when I talked about diversity and inclusion and ensuring you have equal opportunities for everyone in the organization, if you want to track anything related to, let's say, gender pay gaps, you can look at this graph here, because this shows you the pay grades and the average salaries by gender. So in this example here, for my executive tier layers within the organization, I see that I have a gap between the female and the male salaries that we're paying. And of course, if you want to compare that general pay gaps based on different countries, I can do that very easily by filtering on countries. If I want to look at the gap from, let's say, a UK, United Kingdom, I can just simply select UK, and right away I'll be able to see that there's not so much of a gap in the UK for my employees. And if I want to compare the gender pay gap for the US, you can do it in two ways. First of all, I can remove that filter for UK and apply the US filter. But maybe what I want to do is also compare the dashboard side by side. So I can go ahead and pin this dashboard here, and I will load another dashboard. And in this example, instead of looking at my UK employees, I'm going to look for the US employees. So again, by doing that, I right away can see the dashboard for the US, and switching to two-panel mode, again, I'm able to bring the dashboard for the US on the right-hand side and have the dashboard for the UK on the left-hand side, and I'm able to right away compare them to see where the differences are in this example here, gender pay grade. Of course, I can root at that so that we make it the focus of my discussions or my data analysis. Okay. So in the US, there is definitely a pay gap here that we see. In some cases, you may end up in a situation where you do have dashboard requirements which are not available in the standard. So what do you do in this case? You don't really need to really do anything. What you could do is, on your own, you can go ahead and create dashboards as a user of the application. So let me show you an example. Let's say you want to create a dashboard that shows gender by country. Instead of using the filter panel, I want to have the x-axis representing, let's say, the country, and the y-axis representing, let's say, the country, and the x-axis representing the gender. So you can go ahead and add it directly here as a user of the tool. You can define the chart type, so you don't need to involve your administrators or call Nakisa support or Nakisa certified partners to do this for you. As a user, you can go ahead and add your own charts directly. In this case, I can take square chart, and I will call this one the gender by country. I can define the fields that I want, in this case, gender, and let's say the y-axis would be my country. I can select the operations. I want to look at headcount, and maybe I want to look at average salaries. And I can tag this as part of focus area. Like in this case, it will be, again, tagged under diversity and inclusion, and I can confirm that. So on the fly, I now have a graph which is created that shows me the total headcount for my male and female, so the headcount based on the gender for the different countries that I have within this organization. And I can switch the operation to average salary, and this will again show me the average salaries for the different countries based on gender. And if I want to filter to focus on the leadership team, I can of course filter based on the levels of the organization, different layers within the organization, or I can say, you know what, I want to see this information based on executive tier 1 and executive tier 2, which is my leadership positions within the organization. So using this filter panel combined with the KPIs and the charts, I'm able to right away get a lot of information on the fly and turn that information again into insight and interaction. So these dashboards are available for your organizational design as I mentioned before, as well as for your baseline or your what-if scenario. There is other way to visualize the information in Hanelly, and I know that we will not have time to cover everything because I want to leave some time for the Q&A, but just very quickly and very briefly, if you want to see the entire organization on the screen at once, you have this bird eye view, or what we call the Sunburst Graph, which shows you the entire organization on the screen divided by layers. So for example, here, VP of IT represents 17.37% of the overall headcount with an exact headcount of 268. I can see here, for example, Director of Manufacturing that represents 18.92%. And I can switch the operations to look at costs instead of headcount, if this is what I want to do. So the VP of IT represents 11.78% of the running costs, which is the total salaries for the employees that we have. And the Sunburst graph is quite interesting because it also gives me an indication of any kind of records which are not tied to the structure, what we call excluded objects or floating objects not tied to the structure. I'm able to see them here, and I can also get the reports out of them, and this becomes a data quality issue that I can use to address. And this is, again, one of the things that our customers use when they implement Hanelly is to look at the organization overview, look at how the organization is being shaped, how many layers you have, and also being able to look at any kind of data anomalies or floating objects, whether they are organist positions or employees. As I mentioned, so there are different analytics and KPIs and dashboards available. We'll not be able to cover, of course, everything here. Maybe just one last example is the employee maps. If you have a global organization, as I mentioned, one of the challenges organizations have is the globalization of workforce, working across different regions and different time zones. You're able to actually see this very clearly in this map here. I'm able to drill down and see exactly where my employees are located. And when you mouse over, it gives me indication that, let's say, we have 19 employees that are located in Frankfurt, which represent 1.07% of the overall population. And of course, by clicking on this 19, you're able to drill down to exactly who these 19 individuals are. And from there, you can very easily go to the profile of these employees, where you can see various information related to the employee, things like, for example, who you report to, who are your peers. You can compare, you can run different reports on that. And of course, if you want to see where the employee sits in the organizational chart, you can just say, show me, do view an org chart. So Andres Ekstrom, she's a financial analyst who is reporting to the VP of Finance organization, head by Mary Jonathan, who is reporting into Mark Johnson, who's the CEO. So everything is hyperlinked, making it very easy for you to find information. Last but not least, and I forgot to mention this, if you do want to export the structure, of course, you're able to do that in Hanelly very easily. So let's say this is the model that I worked on, and I want to discuss this in a meeting with the manager of these organizations. I can very easily do export to PowerPoint. And when you do that, basically, again, you get a notification here at the very top once it's ready. Let me just quickly refresh it. And once the export is ready, you can go ahead and download it. And this will give you a PowerPoint presentation of that structure that you've worked on, or even the baseline structure that you're working with. And the advantages of this is that it's not a static image. Everything is exported as an object, allowing me to modify it. So if I don't want to discuss the VP of Legal organization, I can simply remove it from this structure here. If I want to bring VP of IT at the top, change VP of ID to, let's say, Senior VP, I can do this information. I can do these changes directly. So everything is exported as an object, allowing me to modify it, and makes it very simple for me to change the data in a PowerPoint format. So that concludes really what I wanted to cover today in terms of the demo. What I would like to do now is just take just a few have a look at some of the questions. And just a reminder, if you do have any questions, please don't forget to type your questions in the question box in the control panel if you haven't done that already. So let me have a quick look to see if there are any questions that have been posted. So a couple of questions. One question is related to integration with SAP and how does the integration with SAP works. This really depends on what SAP system you're using. If you're using SAP HCM ECC, the integration is using standard ALE interface where data from the SAP ECC system is pushed into the Hanelly database in the cloud. And of course, you can then trigger the Delta modifications or changes using a scheduler as often as you want so that you update the Delta changes into Hanelly. For SuccessFactors Employee Central, we are relying on standard OData API, which is, again, standard technology allowing third parties to connect to SuccessFactors and visualize the information as well as write back the information. As I mentioned before, when we talk about organizational design, and one of the advantages of doing org design in Hanelly is the bidirectional integration. So we're not only reading the information from your ERP, but we can also write it back into your ERP. In the case of SAP, we write it back using standard SAP function modules, if it's SAP ECC. And in the case of SuccessFactors, again, we write it back using OData API. Okay, another question was related to the authentication. This is something I just forgot to mention. When you log on to Hanelly, this is a 100% web-based solution, which is 100% sync client. You integrate that onto, let's say, the portal or SharePoint, or even the SuccessFactors Employee Central Cockpit, or if you have Workday, you can integrate it directly from the landing page there. And we leverage single sign-on. So you don't have to enter any usernames and passwords to access the solution. You can very easily do that using the standard authentication technologies offered by Hanelly, and there's a number of them. So if you are, let's say, using LDAP as your authentication source, we can, this is a standard authentication that we're leveraging as well. SAML ADFS, this is something we as well use. Azure Active Directory with SAML, this is something we also support. And if you want direct integration or direct authentication using a form login into SAP or SuccessFactors or even a database, these are also supported from an authentication point of view. Okay. Okay, another question was related to the workflow and approval process. So I haven't really shown that in great detail, but as you know, in this scenario that I worked on, we had a work area created, which was owned by Elizabeth Templeton, and that work area is the VP of Finance. So what I can show you very quickly is if I log out of the application and go back in as Elizabeth Templeton, so I'm just going to proxy as Elizabeth Templeton, you will notice that she gets a notification at the very top saying that Mark Smith has shared the scenario with you, and the scope of the scenario is the VP of Finance. So you can go ahead and open that scenario. You will load it. You can do your changes as part of your modeling exercise. So let's say I want to move the executive assistant under the billing manager, Tia Abraham. So I will do the change, span of control is impacted. I can go ahead after I've done that, and I can basically set the scenario as finalized. Once it's finalized, the person that did the assignment, which is Mark Smith in this case, gets a notification, and he's able to then either approve or reject that scenario. So let me show you very quickly by proxying back in as Mark Smith. So I'm Smith. And if I go to the notification at the top part, I'll be able to see that, first of all, Elizabeth has changed the status to in progress, which means that she's working on that org design that has been assigned, and she's changed it to finalize. So when I open it, I will see that I have two actions now that I can do. I can either reopen it by rejecting it, or I can set it as approved. And I can also start a discussion with Elizabeth Templeton. I can say, attention, Elizabeth, I don't approve the change you did with moving the executive assistant. And basically, I can start a discussion which is secure only between the org design owner and the assigned work area owners. You can have multiple work area owners that are assigned, and they can all see these discussions and collaborate together until they finally reach a state where they can approve these work areas that they worked on. Once all the work areas are approved, then I have the option to select the org design as completed. And once the org design is completed, I can go ahead and basically run the scenario validation and the write back process, as I explained before, which is again a very powerful way to update the data and save a lot of time and burden, if you were to do this manually. So it really simplifies the process of updating your information and data. So I think we are at the end of the hour, and I would like to thank everyone for tuning in and for your time today. And I hope you found this webinar useful. Please don't hesitate to contact us should you have any questions or if you need any further information. These last two slides, and I'll be sharing the presentation with you so that you have this information. You will see what makes Hanelly different. And I talked about these points throughout my demo. But if you do have any questions, please feel free to reach out to myself, and I will be able to address your questions or provide you with any additional information that you might have. So thank you again, and have a great day. Goodbye.